Have you ever had this done before?
I haven't actually.
Marvellous. Right, okay. We have to look at their first house for this year of their life, and to be guided which bits of the astrology are kind of like lit up and functioning. You are Taurus rising, because there's 12 different kind of like first house signs, and we know yours is Taurus. I just want to look at what your Venus is connected to. I mean, all of this looks very kind of complicated, but it isn't when you know what it means. Hi, I'm Mandy. So lovely to meet you. And right, before we do any reading of any description, I'm going to get your astrology up. So hold on just a sec. Let me just... Do you know your time?
It's 2 a.m. in the morning.
Okay, exactly
Like
2 a.m. That's... Okay, so that's your astrology chart. So that's your birth chart. And basically, what that means is everything that's kind of out there in the universe, in the solar system, is moving all the time. Nothing sort of stands still. Things are moving at different speeds, but it's kind of like a snapshot of exactly where everything was at that moment that you were born. So assuming you were born like literally at 2 a.m. exactly, you've got a Gemini Sun, 28 degrees. So that will be accurate because the sun moves roughly 1 degree every day. So unless you've got the day wrong, even though it's close to the end of Gemini, it will be correct. I'm just... my main concern about how correct or not this is there's something called the ascendant, which is very important, and it changes every 2 hours, right?
God,
okay, yeah. So this is the kind of the thing that kind of it's an important part of a chart for a couple of reasons, which I'll explain in a minute. If you were born bang on 2 a.m, you are Aries rising, which means that the sign of the zodiac that was coming up over the eastern horizon at the time you were born was Aries. And that means that the world's first impression of you and your first impression of the world, it's the first kind of moment of kind of like connection, is in the kind of energy of Aries. But I have to query that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's very, very near the edge. It's right on 28 degrees. It's almost on 29 degrees. And as soon as it gets to 30, the rising sign changes. So I just want to kind of like look at, I mean, I'm going to go by minutes here. At what minute would it have changed from Aries rising? 1 minute later, it's at 29. At literally 3 minutes past 2, you're so close to the edge. You're so close to the edge that you would have been at 3 minutes past 2, Taurus rising.
Okay.
Now let's analyse this a little bit. First of all, it changes your first impression and the world's first impression on you. Aries is very, very different energy to Taurus, right? So that's a kind of an important thing. The other thing that happens is, do you see here, it mentions there are 12 houses. So if you are, let's look at your sun. If you are Taurus rising, it puts your sun and Mercury into your second house, and that has a meaning. So we know it's in Gemini, but they're definitely both in Gemini. But the question is the second house the right placement for them? Because if you were born 3 minutes earlier, it shifts everything into a different house. So knowing your rising sign, if we can determine it like here and now, it will kind of affect the layers of information with everything else as well as what it is within itself. The energy of Aries, and remember, this is not necessarily what's going on deep on the inside, but this is the outside, right? Okay. The energy of Aries, it's a fire energy. It's very kind of spontaneous. It will just kind of like know what it wants and just jump straight to it. And people who don't even know you will be kind of like very aware of your sort of boldness. I'm really summing it up in like a second. You could talk for days about Aries, but that's the sort of summary of it. It's what's called cardinal fire, meaning it doesn't sort of necessarily consider things, it just kind of goes for it, and it's obvious that that's a kind of characteristic. Taurus, on the other hand, is an earth sign. It's very grounded. It's very practical. It's very kind of more will consider things. It's, it's kind of, it's much more slow. Whereas Aries is much more, oh yes.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself more on the outside in general? I mean, it's a very generic kind of thing, as Taurus rising or Aries rising.
I think out of the two, I'm definitely closer to Taurus.
Do you think so? Right. Well, if you were Taurus rising, it means that you were born any time from 3 minutes past 2 that morning.
Yeah.
Within approximately 2 hours, you would have been Taurus rising. Nothing else would have changed. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas with Aries rising, it would have been any time prior to that, sort of within about 2 hours prior to that Aries.
Okay. So it's probably some sort of minute after 2 a.m.
Oh, well, it was at 3 minutes past. That
Yeah.
I mean, I can get it down to the second. That's the
Oh my
amazing
God.
thing with like technology. It's like brilliant. But basically, certainly by 2:03, anybody born that day from 2:03 a.m. onwards, for a couple of hours would have been a Taurus rising. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus would be the ruler of your chart because you're Taurus rising. Taurus rising gives you Venus in Cancer in the 3rd house, so we will be taking notice of that today. The other thing that's very relevant to know, I kind of want you to be Taurus rising, but that's not the kind of point what I want. But as you work, I think we can be sure about the next bit of information. You were born at night because the sun was below the horizon. Now, that actually means that Venus is your most beneficial planet.
Okay.
And so to have your most beneficial planet, the ruler of your chart and your rising sign, is a huge advantage. Venus would always be your most beneficial planet because you're born at night. But to have that combination of it being your most beneficial and it's the ruler of your chart is kind of a very nice thing to live your life with. How old are you right now this minute? Are you
24.
24. This year of your life, right? And this first bit I'm about to say applies to absolutely everybody who is 24. Any of your friends that are 24, we have to look at their first house for this year of their life and to be guided which bits of the astrology are kind of like lit up and functioning right now. So by year of your life, I'm not talking about 2022, I'm talking about birthday to birthday. We're working with the kind of like assumption that you are Taurus rising. So, and this part of your chart is very much active this year of your life.
Okay.
Now, the only planet that you've got in your kind of first house, and the first house is all about you, yourself as an individual. It's not about other people. It's not even necessarily about your things or your work or anything. It's about you, the person, in the body that you've got, with the mind that you've got, and your likes and dislikes. It's all about you. Okay. So that would apply to everyone who's 24. Okay. But what is the difference between you and everybody else who is 24 is that you are Taurus rising, because there's 12 different kind of like first house signs, and we know yours is Taurus. Everybody who is Taurus rising, we need to look at their Venus. Now, in your case, Venus is your most beneficial planet. So you should be having a good year, right, this year, right? Not everybody is going to be a nighttime baby who has Taurus rising. So again, it's divided down. They would be having a different kind of most beneficial. So I'm really, really interested in this Venus in your chart. Now, you have Venus, so we find where Venus is in the person's chart, and that will be in all different places, but your Venus is in your 3rd house in the sign of Cancer. Okay, so Cancer is all about your close family. Would you say that this year of your life, your close family, I'm talking about immediate family, has been kind of really significant to you? Venus is all about worth and value. And I mean, for example, let's just say your family have accommodated you, like where you're living now, and sort of like helped you with things and that sort of thing. That would all kind of make complete and utter sense. The third house is also related to siblings. Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have a younger brother.
And would you say that you're pretty close?
Yeah, close enough.
Would you say this year your relationship with your brother has kind of maybe grown a little bit, or kind of like there's been sort of maybe like you've appreciated each other a bit more or something like that? It feels like a very positive energy has gone on.
And so that's since last June.
Since last June.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that.
I mean, that's like really lovely. That is that is really lovely. I just want to look at what your Venus is connected to. I mean, all of this looks very kind of complicated, but it isn't when you know what it means.
Okay.
So, your Venus is at 19 degrees Cancer. So you've got here a thing called the South Node, which is at 23 degrees Pisces, and Pisces and Cancer are both water signs. So when you get two elements that are the same, it adds to the positivity, right? Okay. So this is a very, very positive connection that will have been activated during this year of your life. The South Node of the Moon, it's kind of like what you've come into this life with. It's kind of like belongs to you to start with. And in our lives, what we kind of want to do is have a healthy balance between our South Node, which is kind of like what we already have. We haven't had to go out and work for it or get it. We have that. We naturally have that. And our North Node, which I don't want to talk about that because I haven't got the connection going on there right now this year. I'm not saying it's entirely disconnected, but I'm not looking at that for this year of your life. The North Node is how you kind of evolve from what you've kind of naturally got into kind of it's like your growth, which some people will kind of really rise to that, and other people get stuck in their South Node. But it doesn't mean that your South Node is a bad thing. I just think we're all like encouraged to sort of expand and grow and evolve. So that's a very simplified way of putting it. I'm thinking here, this is in the 11th house, the South Node, which is all to do with groups of people. Do you kind of do well in kind of groups?
Yeah.
Groups with kind of common interests or whatever?
Yeah, small, closely knit groups.
Yeah. But I'm actually kind of wondering as well, because of the sibling connection and the family connection, are you kind of like comfortable when you're in a kind of a family group sort of situation, or even with perhaps your brother's friends, or there's a sort of a natural sort of trust there because they're not strangers? It's like familiarity kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I have a clear distinction between like friends that are like family and friends that are friends. And
yes.
Like very close friends and then family. Like I think it's quite clear cut in my mind. And
I definitely kind of like feel that this year of your life, whether it's happened already or it's about to happen, just be aware of the benefits of familiarity amongst family groups and friendship groups with that 11th house. Even the kind of the mixing of the two would not be a bad thing if it's appropriate. You know, it might not be a bad thing to introduce your brother to your friends and your friends to your brother and all of that sort of thing. It just feels like if you were to kind of have that sort of scenario this year, it would only be a good thing.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense. Not necessarily life-changing or anything.
I can think of some times that has happened in the past year. So
really?
Yeah, like especially over Christmas, like friends meeting my family and getting close.
And have any of those kind of like continued because of it? Like, even in a small sort of way?
Yeah, I think just my friends getting closer to my family and the friendship forming aside from me. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that has happened this year. Yeah.
See, what astrology is all about, because we're looking at your birth chart. If you imagine every single second, right as we are sitting here now, babies are being born and projects are being started, birth charts are being formed at all times.
Yeah.
And then birth charts are all about inceptions, like initiations of things. It's like that was where the thing started, and then at some point it sort of started to play out in the way that was expected in that blueprint, because you're not born as a baby with all of this information and it's all happening as you're lying there in your cot. It has its sort of like times when it's going to kind of trigger something into life, and then that will kind of develop sort of over time, if that makes sense. So I'd keep an eye on those friendship groups, especially if your family or your brother is connected to it, because that's highlighted that it began this year of your life in a positive way.
Oh, wow.
So let's just see, I just want to check here whether you've got any maybe less positive or okay, so
yeah, because it's all looking very good so far.
well, it just happens that it is the most positive planet in your chart. Right, so 19 degrees, that's 28, 18, right, okay. So we do have a challenge going on here between, which is normal. So here you've got Saturn.
Okay.
So the same time scale applies, right? Because I'm looking at Venus. I'm only looking at what is connected to Venus, so it's within this year of your life. Saturn has a connection because it's close on degree. It's at 18 degrees Aries, and Venus is at 19 degrees Cancer.
Okay.
Now, Aries to Cancer, it's what's called a square. It's kind of a challenge. Right, so Saturn restricts things, right? Okay. Saturn, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes life just flows very easily. That would be the connection we just looked at with the friendships and the family and all that sort of thing. Okay. Whereas this is more, in a sense, sometimes the challenge can be more rewarding, because if you overcome something despite the challenge, and it does involve your most positive planet, so it's not as though we're talking about two difficult planets, kind of, but it's kind of getting in the way of the possible benefits here, that challenge there. Saturn puts restrictions and limits on things. So things that you like and that you want to do, so things that are not responsibilities that you have to do, it's more about things that you want to do. I mean, I could be really obvious here and say, like, Saturn's been pretty kind of active for a lot of people with COVID and the obvious restrictions. But would you say that you've had any kind of restrictions this year, like something that you've really wanted and really desired and really felt right, something's kind of got in the way, but possibly you've kind of grown because of it? Tell me.
Yeah, I think up until like recently, there's been a lot of things I've wanted to do, but I haven't been brave enough to start them.
Oh, so you need the courage to do it. Okay, that's interesting, right? Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like slowly it seems to be building up now that I'm getting better at like being brave about things and trying new things out.
That is very interesting, because and it's very interesting as well the fact that it is Saturn, because equally where Venus is your most beneficial energy, Saturn is because you're a nighttime baby, it is your most challenging energy, right? Okay. So I would say get to know your Saturn, because nothing in astrology is what you would call 100% good or 100% bad. Everything's on a spectrum, because of how it connects with other things. It's like, even your Venus, that is really, really positive. Your Venus would score a lot of points for positivity, especially assuming that you are Taurus rising and you are a night baby. That makes your Venus like super strong. But Saturn is going to kind of like take some of that away from it and just kind of make it a little bit more like realistic, if that makes sense. And equally, because you're Saturn, you've actually got Saturn in Aries. Saturn does not like being in Aries, right? Saturn in Aries is not a good mix.
Okay.
So you've already got a Saturn that's not very comfortable within itself, and the good news is that Venus is connected to it. So that Venus will take some of the sting out of that Saturn. In somebody else's chart, I think that Saturn could be more damaging. We've all got Saturn somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not like tarot where these are the cards that came up and that's it.
Okay.
Everyone's got everything everywhere. It's where it's placed. The other thing is, because of the placement of Saturn in relation to your ascendant, that is actually what's called a non-connection, pretty much. So how you appear to be and how you are is not, Saturn is it's almost protected from Saturn, if that makes sense. I think you might have like issues and problems and normal things that people have, and I don't think the rest of the world is too aware of them. I think you just kind of rise above it all because Saturn can't really get in, if that makes sense, or it would be very hard. I would say the only way Saturn is going to get in there and actually do any notable sort of damage, if that makes any sense, would be if the Saturn in the sky at some point is positioned in such a way, because we're affected by outside energies as well. But the immediate thing within yourself, I just think you kind of, I can't be bothered to kind of like let this kind of like interfere with kind of what I'm trying to do, you know. So that would be the main things I would say for this year of your life.